What if every empire from Rome to America follows the same invisible pattern? A 7-stage descent written in the laws of history itself. A rhythm so consistent it has repeated for more than 2,000 years. And today the United States is marching through the final stages. Empires don't just fall overnight. They collapse in silence. One institution, one illusion at a time. It begins with expansion. Rome conquered its neighbors. Spain built a global trade network. Britain ruled the seas. The United States? It conquered markets, not lands. Instead of swords, it used the dollar and the promise of endless prosperity. Every empire starts with belief, the conviction that its destiny is eternal. For Rome, it was divine order. For Britain, it was civilization. For America, it's freedom. And the dollar became its temple. But belief, no matter how strong, cannot fight gravity. History always asks for repayment. Stage 1 is the birth of a dream. A new nation rises through innovation, courage, and unity. Rome built roads, Spain discovered continents, America built machines that could reach the moon. The world admires it, imitates it. Hope fuels growth, and growth fuels pride. Then comes stage 2, the age of commerce. Wealth flows like rivers. Art, trade, and science flourish. The empire becomes the center of the world, its language, its currency, its way of life. But inside this golden age, the seeds of decay are already planted. Because when success becomes identity, arrogance replaces wisdom. And that leads to stage 3, the era of excess. The empire grows too rich, too comfortable, too confident. Production slows, consumption rises. Citizens expect luxury as a right. Governments borrow to maintain illusions. Debt becomes invisible until it isn't. For Rome, it was bread and circuses. For Spain, endless wars funded by American gold. For Britain, colonial overreach. For the US, it's consumerism. The idea that happiness can be bought, financed, and delivered in 2 days. Every empire reaches this same crossroad. They think their system is unbreakable. But power is like fire. The brighter it burns, the faster it consumes its source. Then begins stage 4, the age of division. The empire turns on itself. Inequality deepens. The rich hide behind walls of wealth. The poor lose faith in the system. The middle class, once the engine of growth, disappears into debt. Social trust collapses. Voices of reason are drowned by anger, ideology, and propaganda. In this stage, unity becomes impossible. Rome had its plebeians and patricians. Spain had nobles and peasants. Britain had lords and workers. America? It has red and blue, different flags. Same pattern. Then comes the 5th stage, the era of corruption. Institutions lose their soul. The military becomes political. The politicians become celebrities. And truth itself becomes negotiable. In Rome, bribes replaced merit. In Britain, the empire exploited colonies while preaching morality. And in modern America, corporations write the laws that govern them. At this point, the empire still looks strong, but the foundation is rotting. Debt grows faster than productivity. Wealth concentrates in fewer hands, and foreign rivals quietly prepare for the vacuum to come. From the outside, it still appears powerful. But on the inside, the rot is total. This is the stage where illusion replaces vision, where empires spend more on defense than education, more on speculation than innovation. They cling to nostalgia. We're still the greatest. But greatness built on memory is already gone. And that brings us to today. The United States, the world's financial empire, stands between stage 5 and stage 6. The cracks are visible. Record debt, polarized politics, a dollar losing influence. All while rivals, China, India, BRICS, quietly rewrite the rules. Empires never believe they're collapsing until it's too late. Because decline feels like progress when you live inside it. Rome still built temples as its borders crumbled. Britain held royal ceremonies as its colonies vanished. America builds rockets while its bridges rust. It's not the end yet, but the pattern is accelerating. And if history teaches us anything, it's that no empire escapes gravity forever. Every fall begins in silence. No explosions, no grand announcement, just a slow change in rhythm. A nation that forgets what built it. When Rome entered its 5th century, it still called itself eternal. Citizens filled the arenas. The Senate still met. The legions still marched. But the spark that made Rome unstoppable had faded. The dream had become an administration, a machine that served itself. That's stage 6, decline disguised as stability. The empire looks alive, but its heartbeat is artificial. Wealth is no longer created, it's recycled. Markets rise not because of innovation, but because of speculation. Governments print money to cover the cracks. Citizens borrow to survive, not to build. And the powerful promise that everything is fine, because the truth would destroy the illusion. In this stage, decay wears a crown. The leaders talk about growth, but it's inflation. They talk about security, but it's surveillance. They talk about freedom, but it's fear dressed in patriotic colors. Rome had its emperors feeding the mobs with grain and games. Spain had its gold ships from the New World, each one emptier than the last. Britain had its empire so vast that the sun never set, until it did. And America? It has its stock market, a daily performance to convince the world the empire still believes. Decline is invisible when you're inside it. Because the lights are still on, the supermarkets are full, the soldiers are strong, the screens are bright, but listen closely and you'll hear the cracks. Rising suicides, broken families, homeless veterans sleeping under glass towers, a generation too poor to buy homes built by their grandparents. These are not random events, they are symptoms. Proof that the system no longer feeds its people, it feeds on them. Then like clockwork comes the search for enemies. When empires cannot fix themselves, they look outward. Rome blamed barbarians. Spain blamed heretics. Britain blamed rebels. America blames everyone. The decline of trust turns outward into fear. The military budget grows while schools crumble. The empire projects its weakness as aggression. It fights endless wars not for victory but for distraction. Because nothing unites a divided nation like an external threat, even if it's imagined. But history shows, wars of distraction never end well. They drain treasure, blood, and legitimacy. When the people stop believing, the empire's power dissolves, no matter how big its army. And yet stage 6 isn't just about economics or politics, it's spiritual. It's the moment a civilization loses its reflection. Art becomes hollow. Culture becomes imitation. Heroes become influencers. Knowledge turns to noise. The empire's stories change from "we can build anything" to "we deserve everything." That's the turning point. Entitlement replaces excellence. Pleasure replaces purpose. Comfort replaces courage. For the United States, that shift began decades ago, when the factories closed and the screens opened, when Made in America became Made for America, when citizens turned from producers into consumers, and from citizens into brands. The empire now lives in the age of appearances. GDP numbers glow on paper, while bridges collapse in reality. Social media sells dreams that no longer exist. And the youth, the ones meant to carry the torch, see only smoke. But there's another danger hidden here: the illusion of revival. Every collapsing empire has its false dawn. Rome tried reforms, Spain minted new coins, Britain rebuilt industries, America prints stimulus and calls it salvation. These recoveries are not rebirths, they're pauses, breaths before the plunge. Because stage 6 always leads to one final chapter. Stage 7, the collapse. Not in fire, but in confusion. Not from invasion, but from exhaustion. Before that happens, there's always denial. You'll hear it everywhere. We've faced worse. The system always recovers. The empire is too big to fail. But gravity doesn't care about optimism. It only cares about mass. And the weight of history is pulling down again. The end doesn't come when enemies attack. It comes when citizens stop defending what's real. When truth feels optional. When leaders confuse loyalty with obedience. When every institution serves itself. That's the quiet apocalypse. The moment the empire dies from the inside, long before the world realizes it. And yet every fall leaves a lesson. The ashes of one empire become the soil of the next. History is not destruction, it's recycling. But what grows next depends on who remembers the pattern. Every empire believes it is different. Every leader says this time it's not the same. But gravity never negotiates. And history never forgets. Stage 7, the collapse. Not a single event, not a headline, not a revolution. Collapse is a slow disappearance. A fading heartbeat that nobody notices until it stops. Rome didn't fall in one day. It fell when its soldiers began selling their loyalty. It fell when bread cost more than labor, when silver turned to dust, when emperors became gods and citizens became spectators. Spain didn't fall with a battle. It fell when gold could no longer buy trust, when the empire's wealth was built on extraction, not creation, when ships came back empty and pride refused to admit it. Britain didn't collapse in blood, but in fatigue. It built the world's largest empire and then forgot how to rule itself. It outsourced everything: production, purpose, and faith. The sun never set until it finally did. And America? The story is still being written, but the ink is running low. The final stage begins when people stop believing in the system, but keep pretending they do. When money exists only on screens. When the leaders serve symbols, not citizens. When truth becomes irrelevant and entertainment replaces reality. That's when the empire stops being a nation and becomes a brand. The signs are there. A debt so large it will never be repaid. A society richer than ever, but spiritually bankrupt. A generation drowning in distractions, taught to laugh at collapse memes instead of asking why they exist. Empires don't explode anymore. They dissolve quietly in confusion while everyone scrolls past, and when the end arrives, it doesn't announce itself. It feels like normal, like a temporary crisis, like just another election, just another conflict, just another bubble. Until suddenly it isn't. Until one morning the currency stops buying what it used to. The allies stop listening. The rivals stop fearing. The streets fill not with war, but with silence. And then something else happens. Something that always follows the fall. Rebirth. Because collapse is not the end of history. It's the clearing of space. A violent reset that reminds humanity what truly matters. When Rome fell, monasteries preserved knowledge. When Spain collapsed, new nations emerged from its ashes. When Britain declined, it left behind a language that connected the world. The fall destroys power, but it also plants seeds for those who are watching. So what happens after America's fall? Nobody knows. Maybe chaos. Maybe something better. Because after every collapse, two forces appear: those who cling to the past and those who rebuild. The future belongs to the rebuilders. Those who understand that power is not in money, but in meaning. That freedom is not consumption, but creation. That wealth without purpose is just gilded decay. Every civilization is given a choice: repeat or reinvent. Rome repeated. Spain repeated. Britain repeated. Will America? History's answer depends on whether it listens or argues. Because the same arrogance that built empires also buries them. Collapse is not punishment, it's correction. It's how the world resets balance when greed outgrows gratitude. When humans forget humility, time reminds them. Maybe that's why every empire ends the same way. Not in thunder, but in irony. The richest nations starve for meaning. The strongest armies fear themselves. The freest people become slaves to their own comfort. The pattern is ancient, but it's not inevitable. If collapse begins with blindness, then survival begins with awareness. That's the real lesson of history. Empires die, but ideas survive. And somewhere in the ruins, a new dream always begins, quietly, humbly, without fanfare. A small group of people who still believe in building, not branding. In truth, not trends. In sacrifice, not shortcuts. Maybe the next great civilization won't rise from palaces, but from people who remembered what made the last one fall. Because in the end, history is not about winners and losers. It's about learners and repeaters. The cycle continues until someone decides to break it.